can you play it?
Hi, everyone. Welcome, everyone. It's nice to see you all again or see your beautiful photos. I hope I'll see you in a little bit. Oh, I now have. Fix that. We'll give everyone a minute to join us. I know the numbers will climb a little bit. I am longing for the days that we can be back in an auditorium. So some of you could stream in as in the days of, as in prior days, but I'd get to see you, get to ask questions. I hope you'll come live and interact. I know I could record this ahead of time. Obviously, some things have changed this year, but I'd be really eager to get feedback from all of you, and hopefully we'll have an opportunity to do that. See, almost 50 of you here. I'll give it another couple minutes. People logging in. I know with all our meetings, we always used to say 2 or 3 minutes after the hour seemed to be the perfect time to start, but I value those of you logging in on time. I know with all your interviews, I'm sure you've been on time. So many of you are following suit. I'm admiring all your graduation photos. I haven't seen them all. Now you're all visible by your graduation photos, or your ERAS photos at least. Hi, Dr. Chamorro Dower. Thank you for joining us. And I'm looking to see if any of our other colleagues are here. Oh, Dr. Deshpande, hi. You don't have to come on. You might be in the middle of a procedure. I know you like to join us from interesting spaces. All right. So welcome back. We'll go ahead and get started. We are recording this, so we can certainly share this with your peers. It is January 19th, believe it or not, and the season continues to progress in this very unusual match season. We're hopeful that you remain optimistic and are forging ahead. And I know that historically, when we've had this session, we're coming near the end of interviews, but I'm well aware that some students are interviewing throughout February. So I did not want to delay this session too long, because for those who have finished, many of the same questions start to arise about how to manage things moving forward. So again, remember, this is a global conversation about very general questions that over the years we know come up right around this time, and the processes. And as you'll hear repeatedly, for each of you, we want to make sure you continue to connect with your faculty residency advisor and your specialty advisors to continue to ask very important individualized questions if you have them. So today we're going to talk about, obviously, the rank order list, and a few things at the end just about graduation, since we have our seniors as a captive audience. We don't have all the information related to graduation yet, but some requirements that I want to make sure we start repeating early on. So welcome, and thanks for joining us. I intend early on to spend some time just reviewing the match week schedule itself. If you have not taken a deeper dive into those details, we will spend most of our time talking about the rank order list process. And then, as we do every year, but particularly this year, I want to make sure that I leave time for questions about SOAP. So let's start with just how the schedule works. I don't know how many of you have been on the NRMP website, the National Residency Matching Program site. That is a different process from your ERAS process or your early match process. You physically apply using ERAS or some of the other processes for early match, and your match is managed by the NRMP. So those of you that had not yet registered with the NRMP were already notified. I hope by now that everybody who plans to go through the match has in fact registered. The rank order list entry process goes live on February 1st, but you'll see the nice thing is there's been a delay. Like with many of the processes this year, the list used to be due near the end of February, the third week, and now the deadline is March 3rd. Note 9 p.m. Eastern. That is a firm deadline. After you submit your rank list, the NRMP pushed this to accommodate all of the delays in the whole process this year. And you'll see that there's, for your sake, a short window between when you submit that rank list and when match week begins. The nice thing is that in the past, it was almost a month of just waiting and a feeling of helplessness. A lot of students used to say they just can't stand not knowing. So you have a little bit less time to worry about that. On match week, which starts on Monday, March 15th for the regular match, at 11 a.m. Eastern, you will all by computer learn whether or not you matched. And that means whether you matched fully, if you are applying only to categorical programs. You will also learn if you potentially partially matched, like into a prelim and not into your advanced, or you're advanced and not into a prelim. At 11 a.m., SOAP officially begins, and we'll get into these details later. This means that the list of programs around the country that did not fill will become available and visible to any student who did not match. And SOAP continues the whole week until Thursday. And the NRMP, in accommodating this year's cycle, has also added an additional round to SOAP. We'll talk about that. But that means there'll be more offers made through the SOAP process, and it will end a little bit later on Thursday at 3 p.m. And match day is March 19th, Friday, where you learn where you matched, and that's at noon. NRMP, again, moved everything up an hour to allow you to be notified online if you choose, outside of whatever ceremony process there will be, to be able to be notified of your match. So that's how the week works. Starts Monday, ends Friday. Some timing is a little bit different. On Monday, when students learn whether they matched or not, and hopefully all hear that they have matched. Oh, excuse me. Those who have not matched, we will spend some time communicating about all of this ahead of time and reminding all of you that we will be on site. We will do as we did last year, live, just physically distanced, to allow students to be available to meet with advising deans and a whole cadre of specialty faculty who are on deck to be available to advise students in all of the specialties and to meet with any unmatched applicants. And that's something that we feel very strongly about, and we continue to provide as a resource to our students on that Monday. SOAP will continue Monday to Thursday, and then again, Friday is our match day at noon, along with everybody else. These are just reminders, again, as we talked all through the process. I'm always reminding you of very robust resources that these organizations put together for you. So if you have not been on the NRMP website, I encourage you to go there, because again, I'll post this, the links are here. There is an applicant checklist to remind you of the resources that are available to you about both registration, the PRISM app, if you're still interested in using it, to do some comparison, to follow the NRMP, and to get information about any questions you have related to the match, the algorithm, questions about the couples match, anything else you really want to know, you can certainly find on the NRMP site. Additionally, they have resources to guide you in creating this rank order list, and they will be sending emails out to you with videos that they have, and really kind of a foolproof way to go through the process. So my presentation is not really intended to supersede what the NRMP provides to you, but really to supplement it with the most common questions that our students ask all of us as they're going through the process. I will reiterate here in the second box that these deadlines matter, and we will be encouraging you over and over not to wait until the last minute. You don't want to deal with computer challenges at 8:59 p.m. on March 3rd because you feel like one more time you have to be in the system. So we'll get back to that as we talk about some do's and don'ts. Again, there's a lot of information for you about SOAP online if you're interested in reading more, and we will certainly share a lot with you as the time passes. Any generic questions before I move into the FAQs? You can unmute, raise your hand, let me know. If I miss it, just chime in, please. Don't be embarrassed. I know you're not. So, number one, I changed this a little this year because in the past, the main question was, do I need to go on a second look? And the reality is that we understand that your first look was virtual. So how programs are potentially reaching out to students or talking a lot about an offer to visit has been an area of significant concern this season. I'd love to hear from you if anyone's willing to share with the group about some of this, but I'd like to share from our perspective, both as a school and nationally, what's been going on in this space. We recognize that because of the pandemic, when the decision was made by the AAMC that programs should conduct all of their interviews virtually, and limiting externships, limiting travel, keeping everybody safe, we understand that the playing field has not necessarily been as level as we would have liked. And no matter what is a degree of guidance from a national organization, the oversight of those behaviors or congruence across all programs is not perfect. As such, I know from students directly, even at our school and in the national dialogue, that there's concern that students may still continue to feel pressured to visit a program live in order to be considered on the rank list. And that really is unacceptable behavior. A program should not pressure you in any way to have to be present visibly in order to be competitive, to be ranked. If they offered you an interview, you, like every other applicant, should be able to be evaluated on your own merits. The flip side of that is, are there restrictions for you to go to a city and before you make some big life decisions, travel and see what the environment is like? And that is going to be a very personal decision for every student. As you know, we have not banned travel for our students in general across the year, and have asked that if you travel safely and responsibly, and that you do undergo COVID testing now, as your symptom checker indicates, within 10 days of coming back to Florida before you go back to work. But we understand that the challenge here is, if you visit a city, you don't have an invitation necessarily to visit a program. And the guidelines, if you will, or the agreement that the AAMC and the Coalition for Physician Accountability has really been stressing is to please not pressure students to have to make any in-person visits to a program. So this idea of going back again and demonstrating your interest is not recommended as a national guideline. And what I can share with you all is that we support that your interview was expected to be your opportunity to showcase your talents. This is something that I welcome feedback from all of you, either in the group or outside of the group, because if additional pressure is being felt, we certainly want to help guide you in that process. And this is new for everybody. So the rules are new, the pandemic was obviously new, and the whole climate is different than in the past. So I encourage you to talk with your advisors about this, but understand that the guidance from those organizations that we work with collectively, both as students and then residency program directors, understand that you should not feel pressure to be visiting in person to demonstrate that interest. I'll stop there for a minute and ask for any feedback. Okay. So the big question, how do I put together a rank list and what should go into it? What matters? How do I make decisions? And I'm going to answer this from the perspective of how students have asked questions all along the way. Again, like we talk about at all of these workshops or discussions about residency, we're well aware that you hear from peers who have gone through the process in the past, from residents, from faculty, from Reddit, from SDN, and all kinds of other sources about how to do this properly. And what's summarized here are things that I have repeated and your advisors have repeated year after year that still hold true. For every one of you, this is an individual process, and your critical factors only matter to you. They can't be the same necessarily as what matters to someone else applying in the same specialty, potentially who interviewed at many of the same places. You will be asking yourself how well each of the programs that you interviewed at matches your own qualities and your own critical factors. And then you're thinking about this from the perspective of, where do I have the biggest chance? How competitive do I feel based on my interview for this program? How competitive is the program? And where do I fit in? So we're going to talk about how you balance your needs with what's in your head about, how do I really approach this process? So I'll say this once and I'll repeat this a few times. The match algorithm supports the applicant. You are to list your programs in order of where you want to go. And if your reach is at the top, even if you feel that your fifth choice is the program that you feel most confident about matching in, there's a reason it's your fifth choice. And the algorithm works to align your choices with how programs want you. If you don't put your top choice at the top, you won't ever know if you match there or if you are competitive enough to make it. And this is an area that students struggle with because they are fearful that if they don't put at the top of their list the program they think they just have the best shot at matching at, then they struggle with, how do I know if I was competitive enough to get into one of my reach programs? And we can talk about this with you individually also. So in this regard, your rank list has to be long enough. I know this year this has been a challenge because many students have experienced fewer interviews than historically received, even in specialties that garner more interviews. And so this is a reason to discuss your list with your advisor if you can. You certainly want to go for the REACH program. Your safety programs for some this year are a must because you want your rank list to feel long enough to give you options. And again, to use resources and discuss this individually with your advising dean. I see a message. If you don't get your number one choice, does your number two choice turn into the number one with the algorithm? Yes, and I encourage you to watch the blurb on the NRMP site describing how the algorithm works, because this is the piece that really causes the most angst for students, that they don't trust the system and they're worried that they have to put that program that may not be their top choice at the top to improve their chances to match. This is just a reminder about PRISM as one tool that students use to rank programs against one another. This is a very old example, but really highlights something a student put together years ago. And this highlights how some students think about this. And I will share with you that some of you are numbers people, you love spreadsheets, you want to have all the details, you've been tracking everything on your own spreadsheets as you interview. When we talk about those critical factors, and I mentioned that each one of them carries a weight, PRISM as an app does this for you. This was a spreadsheet related algorithm that was put together similarly, looking at what was important to you, the student. Give it a weight. How important is the clinical experience? And even subdivided in volume of patients, the setting, the responsibility, and ancillary support. Next, if I weighted faculty as the next thing that was important to me and gave it a weight of 15, it's going to carry a value as I rank my programs. How important are benefits from the program? What do they offer me, health related and non-health related? Other things, training, simulation, research opportunities, the geography, the weather, esprit de corps, how happy are the residents? How well was I treated on my interview? How did the whole interview process go? How notorious is the program? How prestigious is it? And is prestige the most important to me? And where do the residents go when they finish? Am I interested in a fellowship? Where do they go off for their job? So however you choose to do this, all of these factors have to be weighted somehow in your mind or on paper. And what I'll share is a lot of students go through the process of putting this on paper, and then they throw it up in the air and say they're going to go with their gut feeling. So it depends on the student. It's a great exercise to give you a sense of really pushing yourself to identify your priorities, and then really look at the programs you've interviewed at. And usually students will come up with a bunch that are near the top, a bunch that are near the bottom, and the ones in the middle sort of morph together. And some of that is often based on geography, it's based on a feel, it's based on a gut, and that's okay. There is no right way to create a rank list other than to assure that you are including all the programs you interviewed at. We'll get to what to do when you're near the bottom of your rank list about whether you leave a few on there or not. So this is an example. This is another very old example of a very simplified version of an example of looking at these qualities again and how to give them a weighted value and for you yourself to rank them. So this is an example of a student comparing the greatest medical center, the best medical hospital, and the mediocre medical center. And in this case, this is how the student ranked the few priorities here, from location being the least important to reputation for the student being the most important. These are fictitious, obviously. But for each of them, depending on the score that the student gives each of those qualities for that program, it came up with a total. And you can see here that these two examples are very, very similar in total, but there's a big difference. The difference is that in this case, both had fairly high scores in reputation, but the residents were far more happy here than here. And the location here, which wasn't very important for the student, got high marks compared to the location at this one. So when you do something like this numerically, some of you may love this and some of you may say this is way too complicated and I'm going to put a few factors and just think it through. There is no right answer, but it is important that you take the time to understand what is important to you, not what other people tell you is best, not just a ranking on Doximity, but really what you have evaluated at the end of the day is going to matter for you in your training. Some links to resources that are important. Our own match data, again, if during the season you didn't look at it, I find it at this point also helpful for students, again, to look and say, as I'm thinking about specific hospitals, do we have residents there? And if we do, can I reach out and get a sense from some of our recent grads who are maybe at my top 2 places that I didn't get to talk to when I interviewed? What's their experience been like? Maybe they're in their 2nd or 3rd year, and that would be helpful for me to gauge my interest. The other is the NRMP match data. Again, if you want to look at your specialty, the length of your rank list, geographically where people match, there's a ton of data on the NRMP website. One graph that I think is really important to hopefully help ease your fears also. Our students match and they match well. And you hear this every year. And I know that this year is different all around, but we still have full confidence that you have exceeded, our expectations in your ability to manage this really crazy cycle. So this is data not for our school, but across the country for US MD seniors who matched. And of all MD seniors who matched in 2020, you can see that almost 50% match in their first choice nationwide. And then you can see 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and beyond 4th. Historically, our school used to get data that was school specific, and the NRMP eliminated that data from our availability. That would show as a school what % of our students would match in their top 3 choices. And part of that is because they've really stressed that the rank list is your data and your data alone. We as your advisors ask if you want to come review the details with us so we can help you, but you are not required to share which programs are where. I would say for the most part, our students like to discuss that with their advisors because we're there to help guide your thought process and make decisions with you, but the details are yours to keep. So we don't have that anymore, but in the past, we also used to have about a 95% rate of match into the top 3 choices. Year after year after year. So I would like to believe that's continuing. I just don't have the actual data to tell you that that is the fact. Back on careers in medicine, again, under the section for prepare for residency, there are some guidelines again on our list and some interviews with people and students. If you want to read a little bit more about the process, feel free to do so. So back to creating it, a few very specific details that you have to remember. You'll be using your AAMC ID and your password to log into the NRMP site. And that's called the R3 system, which stands for registration, ranking, and results. Couples, those of you that are applying together, you must register both of your IDs, and your own NRMP ID and your ERIS ID must be the same. This has never caused a problem. It's just here as a reminder to check that your numbers all align. Some other very important things about putting the rank list together, that is that for those of you that are applying in both a prelim and a supplemental, an advanced, for PGY 1 prelim and then your advanced program. If you are not familiar with how this works, I highly encourage you to review the details and the guidelines on the NRMP page about how to create this supplemental rank list. Basically, it's like a menu. For every categorical program you put in, or every advanced PGY2 program you put in, you will get a pop-up asking you to create a supplemental list. The important pieces here are that your supplemental list can be different for every single one of your advanced entries. The programs can be the same, but the order may change, or the programs may be different. You might say, for example, if I put my top choice as a New York program for year 2, I'd like to stay in Miami for the first year. So I'm going to rank the prelims in Miami first, and then some New York prelims. Or maybe you didn't have New York prelims, you just want Miami prelims. If I rank number 2 in St. Louis, I still want to stay in Miami for the year, so I'm going to include the same supplemental list. But if I match in California for number 3 as my option for my second year, then I'd like to go to California for my prelims. And I have a few of those that I'm going to list at the top. So you can mix and match. Because there are costs associated with each one of your rank list submissions, recognize that if you list a program multiple times on a supplemental list, you're not paying every time you list it. You're just paying for the entry. And again, that's explained in more detail on the NRMP site. What is bold here is incredibly important, and this must be discussed with your advisor. Some of you may have already discussed a strategy that if you feel that you may not match into your advanced position, that you still want to match into a prelim or PGY position that you've interviewed for. And if that is the case, that PGY1 prelim position must be listed in and of itself at the bottom of your main match list, not as just a supplemental, but telling the computer, if I don't match into one of these 10 advanced programs, for example, my number 11 option is to please give me one of these preliminary spots. There are pros and cons to this that have to do with SOAP and what you're eligible for moving forward. So again, if this is the plan and the strategy, you really, really need to discuss this with your advisor and make sure that you're making the right decision. The other thing in bold here is that couples cannot list prelim programs. And I think most of you that have been advised know that. And again, as you're putting your rank list together, this is something really important to discuss with your program. I'm sorry, with your advising, excuse me. Questions about these points for the rank list? Okay. Other general.
I have
please.
I have a quick question about the preliminary program and the advanced program slide.
Yes.
So do the advanced programs, advanced residency programs, do they know at all how it is that you order the preliminary program?
No, your rank list is not known to anybody, not advanced, not prelim, not anybody. That's private information.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Other advice. When you get to getting ready to submit the rank list, there are codes that you will find, and making sure that you are naming the right program. So again, this is a reason why you should not be doing this the last minute. You want to make sure that you're selecting the right program, that the codes match, that if it's a certain track at a program, some programs have multiple tracks and you're able to rank several tracks separately, that you've got everything the way you want it. Give yourself time to work on this. I'm going to skip bullet number 2 for a moment. When it's time to submit, you're going to do what's called certify the rank list. Anytime you make a change, and you can make a change before the deadline, you can change it, but you have to recertify. I have here that you should complete your list a week before. Students usually laugh when we're live and say, yeah, right. I will tell you that if you are done interviewing, and once the post-interview communication that we're going to talk about in a minute is finished, you may feel really good knowing that you're done and you've set this aside at least a week before, especially because the deadline is later this year. Of course, if you have a very late interview, I understand that. But waiting and waiting and waiting and just stressing about this for no reason other than you don't want to commit, I think it's important that you give yourself the time to work on this and feel good about your certification. What is in red? Do not include programs on your list where you do not want to match. Now, we say this every year, and I understand again that this year might be different because numbers are less for many students. And so every interview, what you're asking yourself is, would I rather match, or would I rather know that I'm going to a program that I don't love? The answer is it depends on the student. For the most part, I believe that the advice you'll receive is, let's talk about what may feel so awful about this one program that you'd rather risk not matching than including it on your rank list. It is rare for students to leave programs off their rank list if they really don't have a comfortable number from which to match. So it's rare that you will be advised to throw away an opportunity to match rather than talking about how to make the best of that, especially this year if numbers are lower. But recognize that in signing the agreement with the NRMP, you are signing a contract that you need to read carefully, which says, I am entering into an agreement that if I match, I am contractually obligated to go to that program. And breaking that is not an easy process. And you can look at the NRMP site about things called waivers. For example, my family is here, or my fiance, not in medicine, is in Miami, and I wanted to match here and I matched in California. The NRMP will not say that just being apart from someone who is near and dear to you is a reason to break a contract. And sometimes students erroneously read or think it's no big deal, I'm just going to match and I'll work it out later. So I encourage you that if there are concerns that you have, that you talk about your advisors and you read the NRMP agreement carefully. I see a few questions. One is, can they see your rank list before the due date? Absolutely not. They can't see your rank list until, actually, sorry, programs will never see your rank list. Your rank list is private. Programs submit their rank list. They will never see yours. We'll talk about how you communicate your interest, but they cannot see your rank list. What would be a comfortable number of ranks? You're right. Yes, it is specialty and person dependent, and there's not really an absolute general number across all specialties, because I would say the number of across all specialties, about 12-ish, I would say, is somewhere in that general comfort zone. It's a little higher depending on the student and a little lower depending on the specialty. And so you can look at charting outcomes in the match on the NRMP site, and you can look by specialty for all students who matched, what was the average number of ranks in one specialty that guaranteed that match. And that data is available to you. And then you'll relax, and I promise you, you'll try to towards the end. Fees, I don't have to go into this in detail. It's on the website, but recognize that I know most of you by now have registered. There's still a late registration fee. Couples pay a fee. And the fee of $85 entitles you to your primary rank list of 20 unique programs. If you're ranking beyond that, so this usually impacts mostly our couples, there are additional fees, and the same, a slightly additional fee on the supplemental list, but you can look at that and actually calculate what it will cost. So the next big question, what do I do with all the flattering comments that I'm receiving, which I'm happy to share many students do receive, and you may not have yet, because the whole cycle is a little bit skewed to the latter part of January. So you may reach out to your advisor and say, I don't know what to make of this. I'm getting an email from a chief resident I met when I was participating in the interview, or a program director reached out. Do I believe this? What do I do with all this info? You told me to take everything with a grain of salt and it shouldn't influence my match. So this is all part of what is called post-interview communication. And it goes both ways. Programs, of course, want to recruit the best applicants. So they may reach out to you. There is no violation of the match where a program is expressing their interest in you. That should feel good. It's great if they reach out and say, let us know if you have any questions. We loved meeting you. They may have sent emails to you thanking you for interviewing. They may tell you, reach back out if you have questions, or they may say, like we talked about at the beginning, if you're in the city or if you come to visit, please let us know. And I caution you, there should not be pressure to visit a program live. I don't know if hospitals really are even allowing people to come, but I know that that language is out there. You can certainly believe everything you're told. We'd love for you to feel good about being recruited. The way this matters is that what people tell you should not be the main driver of how you put together a rank list. Your rank list should be where you want to go and not where you think you have the best chance of matching. And I understand that that may sound like they would be one and the same. Why wouldn't I want to go where I'm getting all the great feedback? Well, you might. That might be the place that you feel so great about how they have reached out and have made you feel welcome, that certainly can influence you. But it should not be the only thing. If the program you love is playing by the rules and trying to not influence you, which is what the whole GME community is trying to encourage, if your top program hasn't said a word to you after your interview, that doesn't mean that you're not near the top of their rank list. And they may just be adhering to their policies, which are, we don't want to negatively or positively influence anybody. We interviewed you and we're going to make our decisions based on that interview. So it's very nerve-wracking for students to trust that if there's a place they love and there's been radio silence, that program can still be at the top of your rank list. And you still could match at that program, even though you never heard a word from them post-interview. And this is something I encourage you to talk in detail with your advisors about, because I think this is the hardest part of the rank list. I saw some questions. Going back for a moment, some questions about couples match and the fees. I would say the specifics are on the website, and it's based on how many programs total that you enter. I won't go into the math right now. Some students are asking, if they travel and then come back to Miami 2 weeks before clinical, do they need a COVID test? According to Dr. Weiss and the personalized medicine program right now, folks who travel are being asked if they're back within 10 days to test. So if you're back 2 weeks more, then that's more than 10 days. I would say if you're coming back more than 2 weeks before you have to work, you should be fine. But the testing is free. And for peace of mind, if you can get tested, that's the answer I received from the folks I asked when this question was raised before. If you can test, you're better off getting tested. The requirement is if you've landed within 10 days of return to work for healthcare workers. Hope that answers that question. Back to the rank list. So why do we stress that you can't put all your eggs into the basket of the most flattering information you receive? I'd like to say that this behavior has stopped. Unfortunately, I don't think it has. And this is still quoted in a lot of presentations that you'll see on the web about what happens when big name school writes to the applicant, and it wouldn't be a visit, right? I've enjoyed your interview with us, and it is clear that you're amazing and you represent the student or the applicant that has traditionally done well in our program, and we hope to have the opportunity to work with you in the coming year. It's a nice message. The program director sends this to whom? Here's the asterisk. Every applicant who interviews with us, whether we rank them or not. And this is the problem. I don't think a letter should go out to an applicant that a program knows they absolutely didn't really care for and won't rank. But we can't tell you which programs communicate in which way. There's been a lot of work in this realm in the graduate medical education community, and I'd like to say, and I think you've all heard this, most likely on the interview trail. Program directors are telling applicants, we will not communicate with you. Please do not communicate with us. It doesn't matter. We will make our decisions, and it's okay either way. We don't expect communication, and we don't communicate to you, so we don't influence you. And I'm sure it's been a mixed bag. Some have said that. Some are telling you, we'd love to hear from you. Please let us know if we're your top choice. But you're welcome to tell us. You don't have to tell us. So there's a lot of in this post-interview communication space. And that's why it's so important that you rank programs based on where you want to be. Now, having said that, many of you will receive very personalized, amazing notes that may feel great. And it was at the place where you met residents, you had chief residents, we have alumni, you just feel like you're feeling the love from all angles. That is great. I am not discrediting that. So don't misunderstand that the recruitment tactics feel good. And if it's a place that happens to be one of your top programs, by all means, let it fuel your confidence. But don't discredit the places that you don't hear from, and don't change your mind only because you're receiving messages from some places that actually might be kind of generic, even though they feel very personal. If during your interview you were asked point blank this question, then we have a challenge. The PD asks you where else you applied and flat out asked you, how are you going to rank us? Now, I'm happy to say, I would say in the last 3 years, working with a lot of advisees, I have not heard that this is happening as broadly as it used to. And the NRMP takes violations very seriously. A program asking you to divulge how you rank anything is a match violation. How you choose to respond is up to you. Obviously, if you're on that and you don't feel comfortable and you've answered something vague, great. You don't owe the program anything. You don't owe them an explanation, and they should not ask you. However, you have every opportunity to explain to the program how you feel about the program. So the NRMP has a site to report violations. You are welcome to use it. They encourage you to use it. This is the next big question. At this point in time, I would say this is the part that students struggle with about letters of intent. When do I send them? What should I say? And how do I say it? So I'd love to hear from any of you, if you're willing to share, what some of the pros and cons are about how to communicate, when to communicate, and with whom to communicate. Any thoughts? Because I'm sure this is what you're all talking about right now. No feedback.
I can say something just to provide, something to talk about. One thing that
I would love to hear from you guys. Thank you.
One thing that I've got going on is that so Kate, my wife, will be matching in the psychology match right before my rank list is due. So for me, I kind of need to wait till she gets her match results to be able to be honest with the program and say, you're my number one. I'd like to come there. My wife is coming there. So I kind of have to wait to do that. I think I could probably contact a couple different places and just let them know, hey, I'm very interested in you, just to sort of stay in touch. But, I feel like I can't really give that information till kind of late in the game. And honestly, if I were to contact other places and say, oh, by the way, my spouse matched in a different location, that's not really going to help me. So I'm probably not going to reach out to the others.
Right. So thank you, Ken. And you're speaking to the timing. So I would say that the good news is this year, everything is a little bit late. So the fact that the rank list is not due for you all until March 3rd, and also for programs, mind you, what I am hearing is that even though it's not due, that programs are still somewhat keeping to their original timelines, which means they sometimes start to meet now in January, and they have their conversations about how they want to rank applicants. I think it's not fair for programs to put together a rank list if they're still interviewing in February. So I'm hoping that programs that are offering later interviews are in fact making modifications to the rank list. And I can't imagine that they wouldn't, or they would not offer those interviews. Remember, the program director is the one that ultimately submits that list. And many may have told you this is a committee decision, and it is. But if you're interviewing after the group meets, They're going to consider that interview. And when you communicate with them, to Cannon's point, if it's later, they may have the philosophy that we don't care what anybody tells us. We've made our rank list, so it doesn't matter. Or they may be a program that might say to you, Cannon, thank you so much for letting me know. We wish you the best of luck. And that's usually how they respond, in a very generic manner. They can't give you information about whether your message to me has changed how I rank you. They'll never usually say that. So the challenge here is the right timing and what the pros and cons are about reaching out. So I saw in the chat, yes, particularly in internal medicine. So this is work that was put together a few years ago. Certain specialties have really taken a big stance here and said, do not communicate with us. Do not send us thank you cards. Do not tell us, we don't want love letters, they're called. We don't want to hear from you. We will make our decisions. Thank you for interviewing. Despite that, the anxiety is that students hear that from the program, they hear it from the program director, and then a chief resident emails them and says, let me know if you have any questions, or we'd love to hear from you. And so the recruitment kind of continues in the back door, and students don't know who to trust or what to say. So our philosophy really is, once you have decided on a number one program, you are not violating anything by telling a program that they are number one. And I would say that there are many programs across many specialties who do want to hear from you. Internal medicine is one of those specialties that has made clear, please do not communicate with us. We're trying to do the right thing, and we don't want to be influenced, and we don't want to influence you. So again, some of these questions will be individualized based on the communication you're receiving, and you can talk with your advisors about this. But you telling the program does not usually result in the program saying, we told you not to do that, and now we're going to move you down our rank list. Either they'll ignore it, or they'll do nothing with it, or it's like a neutral message. I have personally never heard of a repercussion like that, but again, the rank list is private, and what the programs do is private. So we can't prove some of this behavior is right or wrong. What I can tell you definitively is that if you tell a program that they are number one, and you later change your mind, and you are not honest with the program that you changed your mind, and you do not rank that program number one, and they expected you to match there, and you do not match there because you put some other program number one and matched in that program, that will come back to bite you. This is a small world, and your specialties are small worlds, and people will remember that kind of dishonest behavior. So to your point, Cannon, if you know you cannot tell number one they're number one right now for whatever reason, I would not suggest that you tell a program that they're number one if you're really not sure. This has to happen when you're ready to communicate that information. Then the challenge is the second part of this question. What about my second and third choice? And I would say that in the last couple of years, the idea about telling a second and third program that they're at the top of your list, it would be an honor to train with you. I so enjoyed my visit, and I'm hoping to connect in the future. You are clearly giving communication that you're on the top and I'm interested, but you're not number one. And many students struggle because they don't want to give that program the sense that they're not number one, and they worry that that will influence the program. And that's the piece where we cannot identify what the program does with that information. So if it's comfortable to you to tell, you maybe you were fortunate and you had 15 interviews and you feel like, I want number two to know that they're way up there, you may choose to communicate that they're at the top of the list. It would be an honor to train there. It would be a great fit, but you cannot say number one to more than one place. So if you feel like any information beyond number one is too much, our advice lately has been that it's probably not as useful to tell anybody but number one anything. And this is the piece that students go back and forth about a lot. And again, I encourage you to talk individually about what you're experiencing and how you're trying to make these decisions. I'm looking at the chat. Dr. Chamorro agrees 100%.
Well, just
Or
because
something else.
Yeah, I am being in the pediatric residency committee for applicants. I've seen that before where people have told us that we're the number one, and then It is a really small world. It doesn't seem that way, but it really is. And you never know if you're going to end up doing a fellowship elsewhere or even come back as faculty. So you just never want to cut any ties. So I agree with what you said 100% with that.
Dr. Deshpande, I don't know if you're still on and if you're able to comment, if you have any other thoughts about this. If not, that's okay.
I actually have a comment if Deshpande doesn't. My fear, I suppose, is that I'm currently, like, my two top choices are like really equivalent for
I lost you, Jenny.
their interviews are done. I know their rank list, their rank meetings are next week. So I already have that information, which means that any letter that I send is timely and needs to be sent, within the week or so, in advance of that meeting. So what kind of advice would you give, short of just pulling the trigger on one? What kind of advice would you give to kind of play those two out? And, you want to be honest, you want to be earnest, you don't want to be deceitful or unethical, but do you say, I really love your program? Because they don't really care if you say that if you're not saying number one. So if all they want to hear is number one and you can't commit to that, then does that just kind of pull you out anyways?
Well, I can't say that they don't care if you say, I really love your program. Again, a lot of this depends on the applicants and the specialty and the kind of communication that you may or may not have. So I would say it's important, if you can't say number one because you still have some interviews pending and the cycle is later, several things. You could communicate after, and even though they had a rank list meeting early, again, it's not due till March. And they shouldn't be influenced by your communication, but I can't tell you whether they will be or won't be. Let's assume they won't be. If they're having a rank meeting early and they're not influenced by any communication, then you should be confident that I did my best at that interview and I'm not going to tell them number one, and I hope that they still want me. That's the hope. I mean, part of this is a little bit of a game and not all of it is perfect. You cannot be deceitful. You cannot be dishonest. If you feel better saying you're at the top of my list, or it would be an honor to train with you and not call it number one, then just recognize that you're demonstrating interest, but they can read between the lines also.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Wait, just to piggyback on that in terms of wording, if we're like not yet done with interview season yet, but there are programs that have like either we've heard from, we've got some post-interview feedback or communication that programs are doing their rank list. Would you recommend writing a letter saying like, currently you're at the top of my list, although like, the interview season hasn't finished for me yet, or?
Because this is unusual, you certainly could be honest and you could reach out if you decide I want to reach out to the program that I think is my number one because I want them to know how interested I am. Sometimes students will use language that at this stage of my interview process, although I haven't yet completed everything, I wanted to express my sincere interest in your program. Something vague. Again, it depends how many more interviews you have. And I certainly wouldn't say the ultimate thing is not to tell a program number one if you have more interviews at places that certainly could end up being number one.
Got it.
I know we're running out of time soon, so I certainly want to get to SOAP. What should my backup plan be if I don't match? So I would say that this season, particularly for most of you who have gone through the process, if there have been any concerns that you may need a backup plan or a parallel plan at the time that you applied, your advisors have likely discussed this with you. But we also recognize that there have been some surprises during the season, and despite everybody's best efforts, not all interview numbers have come up to the level that you expected or that we expected or nationally people expected. So this really means that nationwide, there is a sense that there may be more students who in the past certainly would not have been participating in SOAP who may need to. And I want to reassure you that we have a very robust process to help you with SOAP that I will get to in a minute. My message is not that it should be a time of dread. but we want to be realistic and we want you to be prepared. So if you in that situation, as your advisors start to reach out and say, let's talk about the rank list, it's not to say, tell me what's on your rank list. It's really to check in about whether you feel like you are at risk potentially for not matching, and to review whether you need to prepare anything for SOAP or not. And that means if the backup plan is actually to consider a separate specialty, which in some cases has been the plan all along for some students, you'll talk about whether there's anything you can do ahead of time to prepare for that. Letters in another specialty are not a requirement, especially not in SOAP. But sometimes if students have a connection to faculty in other specialties, they might actually reach out and talk about the fact that they're looking for an extra letter to have on hand only if they go through SOAP. Some students actually work on an alternative personal statement to have ready in the event they're really serious about potentially switching specialties. And again, we'll talk about this individually. If you don't match, you do have the option through SOAP, or like we talked about before, you may choose, if you've applied to an advanced program, you may have chosen to list your prelim options as your residency match. But if you didn't do that, you also through the SOAP could match into just a one-year program. That's an option. There are also online programs that help find vacancies throughout the process. Some students will plan ahead of time that if they're not successful through the match, they will look for some of the research fellowships that are advertised in certain specialties during match week and graduate and participate in those sometimes well-funded research fellowships or time off. Lots of options to consider. By now, I think you probably know what SOAP stands for. It's like a second match. And it is a process where everybody who is unmatched will be able to go through a second process to be paired with programs, and it's standardized and uniform. Briefly, how it works, and then we'll talk about this in much more detail because the NRMP has entire guides and calendars that you can look at, and your advisors can direct you in that way if necessary. Very important for all of you to know, the Friday before match week, so that date is the 12th, March 12th, all of you who are participating in the match will be certified as eligible for SOAP. That is simply saying in the event you needed SOAP, you're eligible because you're registered with the match. We will remind you that you not freak out when you get this email. It does not mean that you didn't match and you will be participating in SOAP. It just deems you qualified and eligible should you need it. That always requires a reminder, and we will send a reminder. On Monday of match week, all unmatched applicants find out at 11 a.m. if they didn't match. We gather students together. We will meet with all of you. And at 12, you will actually be able to have access to the ERAS program to start reapplying. And it's a whole process that goes on between 11 and 12, where we work to guide you, advise you, connect you with faculty in the specialties, and all of those lists of unfilled programs become available to you. Now, I know you might say, how on earth do I do this in 1 hour? You don't have to finish the process. The process opens at noon and it continues. You can basically continue to apply until really for a day and a half, but at 3 p.m. on Monday, programs around the country that did not fill can start to download information. So you really have from about 11 to 3 p.m. where programs will have access to what you've put in there. And the process is fairly straightforward. So it's the decision-making that takes a lot of time. And this is why we spend so much time working with you individually on what your rank list looks like and your plans. So if you're worried about SOAP, you're prepared ahead of time. This is in red. And in the past, we always wanted all our students around campus on Monday, just in case we needed to hang out together. So you're not scrambling to come in. I'll communicate about this again as we get closer to March about where we're going to lead SOAP so everybody can stay distanced and feel feel appropriately supported however they choose. So there'll be more about this from me. Monday to Wednesday, this is when programs reach out to applicants, and these offers that come start on Wednesday, and they come sequentially, 2 on Wednesday, 2 on Thursday. And with each round, students can get one offer, they can get no offers, they could get a multitude of offers. It's not like Match. You do not submit a rank list, the programs submit a list. You could potentially get 4 offers in one round, and then you have 2 hours to mull over that and make a decision. And again, all of this is described on the NRMP site. This is the NRMP site. Lots of info here for you, SOAP for eligible applicants, and you can read and look at how the process works. Questions about that before we close? The piece I would like to stress about SOAP is that it's set up for it to be a very individualized process. Students at many schools, and we've heard this year after year from students working with us and their peers, at a lot of places, students find out they don't match, they use their computer, and they're kind of on their own going through this process. I assure you, all hands are on deck during SOAP week. Every advising dean, a ton of faculty are here to help guide you, to look at programs with you, and help come up with a plan so that you can be successful during SOAP. We also pull student peers together to help support each other, because obviously it's not a pleasant time, and we do everything we can to help you stay positive through that process. Updates about the exam. Yes, so I'm going to jump for a moment. I updated this, and you're right, Jackie, sorry about that. So quick ending to this conversation. As you're finishing up your interviews, your advisors will start reaching out, if they have not already, for you to start setting up time to talk about your rank list. It may not be long. It may be, I had a ton of interviews and I've got this and I have no questions. Great. Some of you may be somewhere in the middle, and some really just want to talk about some questions related to everything I talked about now. So a few things about graduation. You're going to get a lot more information from Tan Stevenson, because some things obviously have changed for obvious reasons. Just please remember to pay attention to the emails that are coming from student affairs or from curriculum on the academic side, making sure you're completing your courses and your credits. You are correct. I apologize. You do not need to take the CS exam. Obviously, that was canceled. No updates there right now. You must sit for USMLE CK, and we know that those who did not have been notified. If you know you have not sat for step 2 CK yet, you should have been notified and communicated about when you're taking that exam. A word about USMLE. If you are still pending a score on CK and you've received it, remember that you must re-release your transcript in ERAS. Programs will not get your step 2 score unless you re-release it. It doesn't go automatically unless you tell the system to do that. Tan asked me to include here that registering and applying for graduation itself are 2 separate processes, and that will go live online starting in middle of February through March. So you will have a month to go through this process. Please pay attention to the emails that will come your way from Tan. There will be a checklist of the things that you have to do to graduate. One of them is getting your picture taken, and Tan is working with all of you to confirm that you received your regalia, and she will be sending out instructions about how to follow the same process you did if you took the ERAS photo at Biomed. That's where you'll be able to schedule your graduation photo. We understand some of you are out of town and won't be back. She will communicate with all of you. Remember, if you have holds or balances or anything else, you'll need to take care of those throughout the season. And when the AAMC GQ, the graduation questionnaire, goes live, although it is not required, we will be highly encouraging you to give the school your feedback. And this is a reminder that it is an anonymous survey, all about your experience. It is incredibly important because that information is used not just critically for quality improvement of our own education programs, but in terms of our accreditation, follow-up, understanding areas that need attention. Your feedback is valuable and critical. So please take the time that we'll ask you to complete that survey. So those are reminders about graduation. That is a big overview about the rank list process and particularly a little bit about SOAP. There'll be a lot more information coming your way. And I encourage you to remember that our students have amazing outcomes across the board. Stay confident, communicate regularly. Don't feel like you have to do this on your own. We have all gone through this process for many, many years. And although the system's a little different this year, for the most part, the process is the same. So we are here to guide you. We will continue to communicate a lot in the next month or so. And I thank you for joining me and for participating. And I'll post this when the recording's done. Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for
Thank
coming,
you.
everybody.
Thank you.
See you all soon. Stay safe.
Thank you very much.